Hi, everybody. I have three questions tonight. I'm going to try and do some justice to at least maybe one of them. One out of three ain't bad. Here's a question from Mary and down in New Jersey. There was a request on Thursday webcast. Oh, this is for Thursday webcast. Could you review the meditation using a spiritual image, Krishna, Jesus, angels, etc., and throwing yourself up towards the image? We did that at a 5-day seminar. And I went about being really fancy by bumping my butt up like this and, making a big deal about it. Hopefully, everybody remembered that part. Nobody remembered what it was about. So, anyway, just teasing. One of the ways you can engage with these images, but it might be helpful for you to have a little bit of background. Every time there is a being who has a lot of energy moving through them for the purpose of helping the species in some way, lives, and then departs from here because they're in a physical body and they go through a cycle of life. That every time you have this kind of a being, you have a link up with a higher level of emotion, a higher level of the physical, because remember your personality is focused on the physical, so there's an aspect of personality in that structure, and a higher level of mind, and energy is coming in and through these folks. You have this system literally in mind, in higher levels of emotion, and higher levels of the physical. These people are still living or linked to the species. So they're living kind of vicariously in the species, always. They don't disappear. That's kind of a background that you don't really understand. But in your memories, you remember your family when they depart, right? You don't forget them. You have moments of engagement, and you remember them. It's as if you are right with them, and they have never gone anywhere. When you're dealing with this kind of a situation, realize that it's real. They have a link with you. You are linked to them. For good or for not so good, it depends a lot on how you perceive those links. The dilemma with this is, remember, as an energy being, not only a personality-oriented being who is basing their life on survival, but as an energy being, personality is valuable. And some of the old ways of thinking, you annihilate the personality so higher levels can engage. You engage with the personality and begin to know as a mature adult that you are imperfect, and in the old Buddhist way, impermanent. You will not live forever in the body, but you will be as a being engaging with frequency. You are involved with higher frequencies from the beginning. No question about this at all. However, how to get in contact with that, how to be aware that that's true, is a part of broadening out the perception that an individual has to the point where they can actually perceive that literal flow moving in you and through you. That same flow that's moving in you and through you is moving through those higher beings, is moving through every individual who's ever been here, regardless of whether that's your parents, your uncle, your aunt, your kids, or whatever it may be. And they have an impact on you, and you have an impact on them. All you have to do is remember them. And if you have a memory of them, for example, I often say, if you have what you called a parent who were a little rough around the edges, but they were truly trying to help you to grow from their perspective, whatever that might have been, and encourage you to live life according to how they thought you needed to do that, then within you, you have a response to that. If you soften your response with that, it's almost as if you are engaging with a you inside of you that is forgiving, not your personality. Oh, I am now forgiving this person, therefore I am great, the great forgiver. I think there was a song about that one time. So, you will not forgive anything unless you allow yourself to soften down your natural reaction to an engagement with the person telling you what to do. And I am blessed all over the world with people who are greatly in favor of, what's the word? What would the word be? There's a whole bunch of people here in the back, at least, hiding. So, if you can handle your own version of being of high value, your personal authority being the only one in existence, then you can begin to understand the degree of difficulty that occurs in every individual on the planet with respect to survival. Then you can begin to understand parents trying to be helpful to you, trying to get you to do the things that they, not do the things that they did, if that happens to be in their mind. To be a better person than they could ever be. Or just, depending on your upbringing, do as they say, not as what they do, that kind of thing. Then you begin to understand the dilemma of a parent. So, here's a dilemma. In the process of growth, the way I see it, there is a constant interaction with higher levels into you. We have to call it soul. In India, they call it Atman, Brahm, and many other reasons, Theosophy, Monad, Solar, Logos, and all kinds of names. Oh God, we're good at naming things. So, you have an engagement with flow. And energy is moving in through these funnels, which, through this universal body, and this gives life to the brain and the nervous system. You've seen this how many times? All kinds of times. These vortexes engage with the nervous system and the brain. This, on this side, is a kind of universality. On this side, it's a kind of similarity to all other beings who exist here on the planet. Since this is a part of you and you're a part of that, then what you can do is learn how to perceive that flow in the back or in the front. Back is a great place to do that. It's often pouring up the front more, a little stronger, because your focus is on the front a little bit. But if you can try to be aware by softening yourself down and kind of leaning back and taking your mind inside of you to search for areas of that flow, which, by the way, you can do if you soften down a bit, then when you find that flow, you can put a picture in your mind. Now, where is the mind now? If you're noting, I've said now, pay attention inside with your mind, right? So the mind is inside. You've moved your attention. Take your attention, find that flow inside of you, where that you can notice just a bit, and then lift it up into an image of a form that is in relationship with that which we don't perceive well, or that universality. Reach into it and go to that image in your mind. Your mind can travel anywhere, everywhere. These systems, these forms are hooked. I don't care what they are. If you don't have to believe this or not believe it. Practice it and see what it does. You will begin to notice that this system is getting stronger when you do this. If you engage with Christ, because we have people who, or Krishna, or a guru that you know, God knows that that you have learned about, and you believe the stuff that he or she has talked about, then you go to that and you engage with it. Or you have an icon or an image that you take that to be a Buddha or whatever. You go to that and you lift that up in a way in your mind. You're moving towards that image, and within a second you're in that image because the mind is able to be there. Your mind can go back 50 years in a nanosecond. In a reflex, your emotion can be where you were when you were 10. In a second. I'm trying to be helpful here so that you understand that emotion and mind are effectively functional in that way. You can take a relationship that you have within yourself, if you can train yourself to care for yourself sincerely inside, and take that and reach into an image that you have in your head and be with that image, and you'll be shocked to find out that there is an instantaneous glow with those higher beings. Now what you're looking for, while you're doing that, is to increase the susceptibility that you have to broaden out the capacity that lies within you, that you are not necessarily cognizant of, but you're conscious of how you should be in your personality, unconsciously or consciously, but you're not conscious of that. So you're training yourself to be more conscious of it. We did a little exercise in Montreal where we put Satchitananda's image up there, a picture. And I had people go up and engage, soften down, and engage with the image. And they was, my goodness, it was strong. The reason why it was strong is I knew Satchitananda had energy glowing all the way through him, because I had experienced that and we had engaged in a little energetic repartee. So I knew that that was real, and I knew that that would be helpful to them because it would increase, just bump up a little bit in that moment, energy. Just like you remember an experience in your past and you are bumped up with the emotion, bumped up with the realization that you're seeing that in you very strongly, and even your personality will respond to it. You can do that with good images, and you know you can do that with not so good images, because you are practiced in survival. Therefore, those come first. Survival is the process through which you engage with the personality. The trick in this, because some of the other questions are involved with this, the trick in this is you can use this method to do other things. Here, Carol asked, how do we comprehend and accept the highest form of intimacy at an energy level without bringing to it our own human issues around trust and expectation? That's a specific question about trust and expectation. But you talked about intimacy. If you have ever been intimate with yourself, that you are extremely vulnerable, inside, and almost with, you had an ache inside to be affected by something else. And if you ever had the realization that you could notice that there was also something there that would be kind to you. Case in point, if you are helpful to somebody and that person may or may not know it, but you know you were actually helpful. There is a level of intimacy with you in the relationship that this level of soul, or whatever you want to call it, is in you. That is an intimate alignment with how the soul functions. It will give you anything and everything that you believe is valuable. Now, when I say that, I mean this. If you walk around an engaging personality, whatever it is, I don't care what it is, and you continue to engage the same way, it will begin to feed how you are engaging. It will help you to remain exactly the same. You will be the one who is not happy with how you function. But in reflex reaction, you will identify exactness. But there will be an off. Something is off about that. And you'll sense it. This is related to the soul. Soul, or that universal aspect, comes in and constantly attempts to help you to understand that you are not exactly the way you were before. But you are free to engage that way until you learn that that is not helpful to you. That is also true of being too loving in a world that would take advantage of that. So you eke out and engage in a way that makes some sense to you, so you can validate a sense of, okay, that place of engaging, living life is okay. I'll be able to function that way. So you're constantly making adjustments in your intimacy levels inside. And you're constantly fearful of being too intimate, too loving, too caring. Because if you become too caring of yourself, listen to this logic, you will know for sure you don't deserve it. Why? Because of all the things that you've done that you wish you hadn't have done. See, this is the personality talking. It's not the soul talking. Soul never ever did say that. Our universal self never said that. God, we have so much of that stuff in our spiritual stuff. You do this, you're bad, do this, and this is right, and this is good, and all the rest of it. And it is devastating to find out that that could be true. Oh yeah, I forgot. There's a guy with a gavel, and there's a guy that comes down hard on me. That's always a guy. Guys get a bad rap. There's no gender in that flow. It's both. Nothing to do with a guy. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Terrible way to think. Wow. However, have you ever thought that way? Of course. Anyway, so note that I put to myself, when I read these things, I'll never remember this stuff. So, soul is already you at the survival level. So if you can understand, you're engaging with the soul. You're operating like you should operate, but that's you using that flow for the purpose of survival the way you think it should be. That's interesting. Physically, emotionally, and mentally. Wow. So you can use that in a different way. You're energetic in nature. So you engage with those things that are fruitful and valuable from your perspective and try to make sense of them. And it doesn't mean everybody else or anybody else needs to do that. If you're doing it, there's no necessary expectation that others need to do it. So if you have a value system that says, if nobody else is doing it, why the heck should I? Which you don't have in this case, of course. Then why should you? You will defend against doing something that would be credible towards allowing yourself to care for you, even if you've done most horrible things. So you're judging yourself harshly because you believe unconsciously that that should be true. Still believing in the idea that there's somebody going to get you in the end. Nobody gets you in the end. You're just learning. But to begin to learn and recognize that you're learning and pull away from what you can get away with, one can say. God, that's got to be hard. It's got to be tough. Because the structure, a little vibratory system in our personality field, these methods of survival, 4 or 5 major ones, we go to under severe circumstances, what we call severe circumstances. And that means we are highly sensitized to using these systems more often, and we don't need to. There? So these two systems, this trust and expectation, means not trusting, and our expectation has got a negative flavor to it. So what you try to do is realize that that's a structure of survival internally, and you try to soften that down. What you're doing as an adult then is attempting, did you hear attempting? Imperfectly to readjust that system. Perhaps not perfectly, but nonetheless, doesn't matter. You have made an inroad into it. As you do that and your focus is on that, energy will come from this level through one of these structures into here to try and help. It will help the blue because your focus is on the blue, and this other part will enrage a bit because it's something's taken over, and then if you can catch it consciously, it softens down and the other starts coming because you are the one who decided to soften it down. It's as if we are kind of an umbrella with many aspects, characteristics, and we are learning not only to have it open just a wee little bit, but to open it and broaden it out. And as soon as we have it open to its greatest ability, still a mechanical device, then we can go beyond it. Prior to that, we cannot let it open fully because our inability to be comfortable is strong. And when discomfort is there, we have to use our old friends. And these old friends are basically trainings within us. And the person who has to look at that is ourselves. Respectfully, not resentfully, respectfully. And this begins to shift in trust, and also there's a shift in expectation. Remember, if you are not used to caring externally or internally, and you begin to, you will feel as if you are thwarted almost all the time. And the reason for that is you are not used to it. You're used to not doing it. It usually implies you have more love than you know that you can give. And you're just afraid to give love because it might be something that diminishes you somehow. And that's involved with training. If it's true what I'm saying, that this level of loving and compassion, the depth of compassion and love, is real, and it's trying to fuse with the personality, then you have the capacity to love as deeply as that. And it's never given you a hard time. You have given you a hard time because you're the boss, right? I did say that, right? I'm blessed with a whole bunch of bosses. Yes. I'm not sure whether I used the right word there, but I'm sure there's a good reason for that. So I've talked about fusion. So one of the things I would say to myself is learn to focus on sincerity. How sincere am I? I'm not sincere. I don't care. I don't care how sincere you think you are, Ron. Be more sincere than that. Come on, be sincere if I'm talking to myself. Can't say that about anybody here. I get my throat cut. But anyway, because you guys are really tough characters. But being sincere inside allows you to be honest with yourself without putting yourself down or up. Say, oh my God, I caught that. I think I got that. I'm not sure, but I think I got that. All right, let me see if that'll show up again. It does, all the time. Learning how to focus on personal kindness and externals with kindness. Very difficult because how you hear things is directed by your reactions. If you hear things, you will react to what you hear on a vibratory level that you're used to, which means support of survival. The way you're used to engaging with survival. I'm looking you, Carol, at you because basically it's your question. So that's why I'm continuing to look at you. So the other thing is that I find really helpful is pulling back when the intensity is strong. I think I was talking to Mary today and saying, when I'm teaching sometimes, you can hear my voice is intense. Well, that's because I haven't learned how to pull back and make that softer because I'm trying to be sincere about how it's coming in. So if I was in a big hall, then I could talk like this. It just happens this is a smaller hall. So I could learn how to pull back for small halls. It would be better. But the intensity is there, and there's a method of learning how to soften it down. And what I'm talking about is the personality. But because you talk softly doesn't mean you're soft. I've learned that a long time ago. And because you talk intensely doesn't mean you're harsh. It means that's what's going on then. That's all that means. But is it easier to engage with the person who's speaking softly? Sometimes it is. Is it harder to engage with somebody who's speaking more intensely? Sometimes it is. But I'm brought up to listen hard and soft. So in my family upbringing, partially bringing up myself, I have to engage with a realization that that's a little bit too loud, that's a little bit too soft. So I include too soft may not be sincere. Modulation of the voice is not helpful in honesty if it's not honest. Got to think about that in terms of sincerity. Fair enough. If it's naturally, okay, then fine. Learn how to bring down what's natural for you. So I'm learning. I've been learning for 40 years, as I tell Scott all the time. And he just shakes his head and doesn't believe me. Okay, that's what I would say for that one. Close on the backs of that particular one was one by Doug Legacy. Is there an optimal way to ask for guidance from the heart? Asking from the heart to get an answer from the heart. Oh God. Look, best I can do with this is this. I would love to say that everybody's heart center is wide open. Potentially it's true. However, our solar plexus is the kingpin and has been for a long time. These structures are there for a really good reason. It's like the forebrain. It's an operational structure. The forebrain makes sense of things. You try to organize and coordinate and engage and make sure things are making some sense. But in the emotional dispositional structure that relates directly to clear survival, this is related primarily to reflex response. And on the whole, when we're engaging with life, the bulk of our life is related to reflex response. And one of the ways, if a person is in their head all the time, one of the ways to get that person out of their head is to give them something that they'll react to. Then they'll find that they're not very comfortable in reaction. Fair enough? The dilemma with this is, find that's okay. And partners do this all the time. Try to get the other person to react. That way, they're not really in their head, they're in their emotion, and they can be manipulated unconsciously. This manipulation is done. Not consciously. There's not a way to look at this. If it's true, then what you have to do is slow down your emotional disposition so you can consider things from the mind level, from the intellectual level at least, where the intellect is not aligning with the emotional dispositional response. One of the ways that people used to make sure that their kids were under their thumb was to get them to engage emotionally and react so that the kid couldn't think. Then reaction was the only thing they had, and they would get out of their way. Fair enough? Problem with that is, kid grows up to have a strong emotional dispositional structure and become sensitive every time they're able to think. Emotion interferes with that thinking. And often those minds are really very well equipped. But the emotion is also well equipped. So people end up being in the emotional system a good 80% of the time because that's the one that was trained when they were young. And therefore they see the world through that emotional system, which was a defensive system to survive how the parents enabled them to be out of their hair. It's a very interesting thing. Bringing up kids is not easy. Bringing up parents is even worse. So, but you bring up parents in you, and you act like children at the same time. This is natural. This is normal. It's what everybody does. So somehow we have to make new definitions of parental guidance so that the childlike side of us can soften down. The childlike side of us can soften down, so we can soften down emotionally. So that we can move into a sincerity, here we go with sincerity again, and an honesty that relates to the heart center. The heart center doesn't want to win or lose. It looks and tries to have a kind of honest compassion. This is very difficult for us to understand. Usually we understand compassion by the word sympathy. Loving is related to sympathy. In fact, loving is not necessarily related to sympathy. In the old traditional Christian orientation, to find love, you had to go into this state, this soul state. And the dilemma was, other than that, you had to engage the best you could with caring for another in spite of what their caste was. And there are a number of stories in the New Testament around the caste of an individual, like Samaritan, the Good Samaritan. Samaritans were not looked upon very highly, but they looked after the bum on the road or the person who was hurt on the road. And then the individual who was at a sort of semi-low caste was appreciated more than the individual who was able and functional, because they didn't stop. They were too overcome with their importance to stop. In fact, that's not quite exactly true. They were overcome with the value of themselves in the position that they had related to another level. And they were afraid to stop. Fear stopped them from stopping. And so that's why there was such a focus in Christ's teaching about what you really have to be afraid of is fear itself. Fear is the thing that you have to slow down in. And this is really difficult to do. Now, meaning, if you become that which is not you, which is you, you are one. If you become that which is not you, which is you, then you are one. I am that. I am that which I am. I am presented within me. I have that within me. And if you could allow yourself to be okay with that, then this idea, intellectual idea about the heart center speaking, would be an engagement with a recognition of that flow through that chest, and an idea popping into a mind that was quiet of the intellectual process, but receptive to an understanding that may come from a higher level. But you must be receptive, because it may not agree with you. The true heart center doesn't necessarily agree with the solar plexus's orientation of importance and great value. But the solar plexus is valuable to get to the stage where you can observe it from on high, the heart or the crown. That was the old tradition, and still is actually how it works. So in a way, quietening down the mind, the emotional mind, the intellect, and the fervor of self-importance, which is really difficult for us here on this planet, then you can actually say, oh, this may not be helpful for me. This may not be helpful for me. Doug, the dilemma about this is that the mouth and the brain is fed by the solar plexus, root, and gonad center. When the heart starts to come on, there is a complete recognition of the fact that what's going on in those centers as they relate to the energy all around you, which is your personality, which is not wrong, not bad, it sees through how right you are or how wrong you are, and does not display either rightness or wrongness, but it shows you a different option. And if you are intent on not seeing those options, because your intention is to preserve how you are and how you were, because it makes you feel better, because this is new territory, and it would make you feel vulnerable a bit, then your option would be only to survive the way you were yesterday. That is consistent with every day of your growth. Everybody has this. No exceptions. Unless you've been fortunate enough to come in, as some have, already glowing in that form. And even Christ went through some options in this, because he had to go into the desert to be alone, to engage with the being of this level in a manner that was recognized from a different level. So the lower level was perceived and understood from a higher level. So you could say, how many people are here tonight If it's over 50, wow, that's really a terrific class. But what if it's only 7 avatars? And 150 have crammed into this room. What would you rather have in your class? I know what I'd rather have in my class. God, I could learn all kinds of stuff. 7 avatars, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, so 9, 10. It's just an example. Does that make any sense to you guys? Okay, so the idea of practicing the willingness to allow yourself to go a little beyond the business of what you know must be true, how you react into truth, your personal truths. There needs to be an option. Is it possible that there are other options? Well, there may be, but today's the only one I can see. Deal with what you can see. Move forward. Mary, I hope the idea of reaching up with the mind, a little trick is if you can be comfortable thinking about the Buddha as a compassionate being, Christ is a tremendously universal loving being, Krishna as a tremendous individual who has full comprehension of loving and compassion and wisdom. You might not be able to do that because you're not Hindu necessarily, but do what you can and then reach up, sense in your mind a caring for you. Got to do that anyway because that soul is you and you're caring for it. It's not about your opinion. I don't care about your opinion. You'll die one day. Oh, by the way, so will I. So what's your opinion got to do with anything? Nobody's going to remember it unless you write it down in a book someplace and then nobody burns it. Although they might want to if it's really that good. Eventually, people don't like books. Sometimes they do. It's all nonsense I'm talking, just make it up funny. So what you're dealing with here, what you're really dealing with here is getting to the stage where you can take yourself seriously and try to soften you down to the best of your ability and then reach up as if you're lifting your whole body. You can do the pump that way. You know how you do this? Do it like this. And follow the line. It's like a projectile to that form that you might have in your imagination. You'll be shocked to find out, if you do this a few times, that you'll notice a lift or a change in the energy around you. Do it. Remember, move into that state. Even if you can only notice your neck or your toenail or your nose hair quivering on the inside, or an earlobe just buzzing because you know the universe is operating through it. I don't care what it is. Perceive that stuff and then use it to engage with the link-ups that are still here in this form. The form of our minds, our emotion, and our physical capacity to imagine. Use it and find out for yourself how strong that is. And doing it more than once, you'll be shocked to find out sometimes it will really work. Sometimes it won't because you're focused on you. And you'll give yourself heck, I'm not able to do that. Now you're really focused on you. Is that bad? No, I've been through the same blooming thing. Okay? What is going on for the last few days, I'll say? I haven't noticed anything of real interest. Oh, glowing consciousness or whatever. And then all of a sudden, I focused off of the noticing or not noticing and back to being aware of the reality of that. And it's there. I hope that helps. I hope it helps because it is effective and it works. But you've got to try it. Now, if you don't necessarily think it's going to work, try it anyway. The more you try it, the more it might shock you if just for chance your defenses are down. And you're on, well, I'll try it anyway. I don't know. You just might be shocked into finding out something's there. Other people have noticed it. Mind you, they were extra special. Yeah, just like you and I. No extra special at all. Just human beings. I wish you well. Thank you. And I know I apologize for not blabbing on unless somebody else has another question. This is here for you, for questions. Please send in some questions. It will be, and if I can be of help, and if I can't be of help, I won't even bother with them. You'll know. He doesn't know the answer to that one. Or not. Just make sure you have the same email that you're always using, and it'll be fine. Thank you, everybody. We're just going to meditate. Take care.